The Los Angeles sky burned gold as dusk draped its final veil across the skyline, the mirrored towers of downtown flickering like monuments to ambition. Traffic pulsed below in staccato bursts, headlights flashing, horns barking, the city exhaling another chaotic day. High above it all, nestled on the rooftop of a building where entry required pedigree or power, Echelon West glittered like a jewel, its chandeliers casting constellations of light across marble floors and crystal glassware. And into this curated world stepped Nia Carter, unnoticed by name but instantly judged by presence. Her dark skin caught the amber glow of the setting sun. Her grey sweater, soft from use, bore faint traces of chalk from an afternoon spent mentoring youth at a local community centre. Her jeans, worn at the knees, whispered of substance over style. She wasn't here to dine, not yet. Just to book a table, a surprise for someone she loved. But as she crossed the threshold, a chill met her not from the October breeze, but from the eyes inside. They scanned her like a misfiled name on an exclusive guest list, calculating what didn't belong. The perfume of lavender and aged wine hung thick in the air, but underneath it all, Nia could smell it. The tension. Something unspoken, something waiting to unfold. And still she smiled, because she knew something they didn't, something just around the corner on four wheels, in black chrome and quiet thunder. A warm breeze rolled through downtown Los Angeles, rustling the palms along Grand Avenue and carrying with it the scent of jasmine and distant grilled street corn. Above the city's noise, perched atop the glass-encased Meridian Tower, Echelon West glowed like a crown, its rooftop bathed in golden light, its staff gliding between linen-draped tables like choreographed shadows. Inside this temple of exclusivity, where reservations were whispered and wine lists guarded like treasure maps, the rhythm of the elite played on without pause. But 6 floors below, moving with quiet resolve through the humming sidewalk crowd, Nia Carter was climbing steadily toward that very world. 33, thoughtful and composed, she wasn't dressed to impress. Just grey sweater, chalk-dusted jeans, and sneakers softened by time. But every step carried purpose. She'd spent her afternoon at the Lincoln Avenue Youth Center, leading a workshop on self-worth and entrepreneurship for a room full of black teens who hung on her every word. Her hands still bore the smudges of whiteboard ink. Her mind, the weight of promises she'd made. But tonight wasn't about work. It was personal. 10 years ago, this very rooftop had played host to her first date with Julian. Before the boardrooms, before the billion-dollar IPO, back when he was a broke tech idealist, scribbling dreams onto diner napkins. She had chosen this place deliberately, not for its status, but for its history. A quiet anniversary surprise. Something intimate, meaningful, something that reminded them who they were beneath the spotlight. As she neared the entrance, a valet brushed past, barely noticing her. She didn't mind. She wasn't looking for attention. She was here for a simple task, lock in the reservation, then vanish into the evening. But the moment she entered, stepping from sidewalk grit into the hush of marble and lavender, something shifted. The light changed. The air grew still. The maître d', standing like a statue in heels, flicked her gaze upward from the leather-bound guest list, pausing at the sight of Nia's worn sneakers. Eyes narrowed, expression unreadable. Nia offered a smile, soft but certain. "I'd like to make a reservation for next Friday," she said. Her voice was smooth, practiced, the same voice she used to calm a room of skeptical teens. But the energy in the space rippled. Not loud, not violent, just wrong. A pause that lasted too long, a glance that weighed too much. And behind Nia, a patron in a tailored blazer muttered something low, chuckling as if she were a misplaced prop on an expensive set. Nia stood taller. She wasn't naive. She knew what this was. She'd faced it in boutiques, in airports, even at school board meetings. But this place, this moment, was different. It wasn't just judgment, it was erasure. Yet even then, she didn't step back. Not yet. Because she knew this wasn't the end of the scene. Somewhere in the city's pulse, her husband was heading this way. And when he arrived, this silent storm was going to break. The instant Nia stepped closer to the podium, the mood shifted from chilly to sharp. The maître d', whose nameplate read Lauren, lifted her chin with the grace of someone used to gatekeeping the upper crust. Her fingers hovered above the reservation book like it was a relic. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice coated in polite venom. "We're fully booked through next month." The words floated out like a velvet rope snapping shut. Nia blinked, caught off guard, but only for a breath. "I understand," she replied, her voice even. "It's for next Friday, just 2 guests, a special anniversary." She offered a smile, warm but resolute, the kind that had disarmed boardrooms and won over skeptical donors. But Lauren didn't return it. Her eyes flicked down again, sweater, chalk-stained jeans, old sneakers, and something in her gaze hardened. Behind Nia, a man in a charcoal suit muttered just loud enough for her to hear, "Brave choice coming in like that." A soft snicker followed. Nia's fingers curled slightly at her side. The walls of Echelon West gleamed around her, polished marble, golden light, perfume and wine steeped in the air, but none of it felt warm. It felt like surveillance, judgment. And still, she held her ground. "This place is meaningful to my husband and me," she added more softly now, trying to shift the air. "It's where we had our first date." That detail landed. Lauren's eyebrows lifted, just barely, as if she were recalculating. But before any real shift could take place, a new voice sliced through the moment. "Excuse me, Lauren." The words came from a wide-shouldered man stomping toward the podium like he owned the building. Preston Hale, his name whispered in finance circles, his face familiar from business covers and charity galas. Late 50s, flushed cheeks, expensive cufflinks catching the chandelier's gleam. "My table isn't ready, and I asked for the 98 cab to be decanted 10 minutes ago." His voice boomed, bouncing off glass and stone, his irritation dressed in entitlement. Lauren turned to him immediately, her demeanor flipping into deference, eyes brightening. "Of course, Mr. Hale, right away." She reached for the book, alive now, suddenly mobile. Nia stood frozen, watching the contrast strike like a slap. Preston finally noticed her, his eyes running down her frame with open disdain. "Is this the reason for the delay?" he asked Lauren, not even bothering to lower his voice. Then to Nia with a smirk. "Did someone get lost on their way to a food court?" Laughter, a ripple, not loud, but sharp. Nia's stomach tightened. She forced herself not to react, not yet. "I was just finishing," she said calmly, though her voice betrayed the tremor behind her ribs. But Lauren's hand moved to close the book again. "We're full," she repeated, final this time, like a gavel. Nia nodded once, slow, backing away without turning her back. The warmth of her reason for being here was starting to flicker, and she didn't know it yet, but the storm hadn't even begun. The cold night air hit Nia like a slap as the glass doors of Echelon West sealed behind her with a hiss, muffling the laughter still echoing from within. Her sneakers met the concrete with a hollow thud, each step away from the entrance thick with a disbelief that hadn't fully formed into anger. Yet. She stood still on the sidewalk, bathed in the orange glow of a street lamp, trying to catch her breath against the weight in her chest. Her fingers twitched toward her phone, but she hesitated. She hadn't told Julian about the reservation. It was supposed to be a surprise, something soft, something sacred. Now it sat in her hands like a mistake she couldn't undo. She turned, glancing back through the towering windows where the world kept spinning untouched. Inside, Lauren resumed her duties, face calm, posture steel. Preston Hale sat down with a flourish, already laughing with a new audience, a king in his court. His dismissal of her, just another anecdote to feed his ego. No one missed her. No one noticed she was gone. And that was the part that stung the most. A passing bus roared by, gusting her sweater against her arms. She rubbed her hands together, the chalk now smeared and ghost-like, an echo of her afternoon. She'd faced things like this before, small cruelties dressed in civility, but tonight had been different. Too calculated, too deliberate. It wasn't just about being ignored, it was about being erased. The pieces began to click, slowly, painfully. Lauren had never even checked the reservation book. The second Nia mentioned her anniversary, there should have been at least a flicker of empathy. Instead, there'd been protocol, layers of it, built not to serve but to separate. She'd walked into that place thinking she could simply explain her way through a wall she hadn't built. She realized now it had never mattered what she said. She sat down on the concrete planter outside, the edge cutting into the backs of her legs, her breath fogging slightly in the air. Her mind swirled between memory and present. The candle-lit first date 10 years ago, Julian's nervous grin, the shrimp and grits he couldn't stop raving about. The same space now tainted. Her jaw tightened. A small voice inside her whispered, "You should have known." And maybe she should have. But the ache of wanting to reclaim something good had overpowered the caution honed by experience. Then came a sound, low, unmistakable, the purr of a high-performance engine. It rose above the city noise like a promise. Nia lifted her head, her pulse skipping. A sleek black Bentley Bentayga glided into view, its polished frame catching reflections of the city skyline. It pulled up to the curb with quiet authority, and the driver's door opened. Out stepped Julian, tailored navy suit, sharp lines, the same fire in his eyes that had once vowed to build her a world that made room. He scanned the sidewalk, then saw her, and in that instant, everything began to shift. Julian's footsteps echoed like thunder as he crossed the threshold of Echelon West, the glass door swinging shut behind him with a decisive hiss that sliced through the murmur of clinking glasses and hushed conversations. The dining room didn't register his presence at first, just another well-dressed man in a city full of them. But then heads began to turn, one by one, as if the air itself had shifted. His tailored navy suit caught the chandelier's golden light, and his eyes, sharp, clear, burning with intent, swept across the room like a searchlight. He was looking for something. No, someone. At the maitre d's podium, Lauren froze. The leather-bound reservation book lay open but untouched beneath her manicured fingers. Her mouth parted as she recognized the man now standing before her. "Mr. Carter," she breathed, her voice suddenly smaller, thinner. "We weren't expecting—" "I'm not here for a table," Julian interrupted, his tone low but electric. "I'm looking for my wife, Nia Carter. She walked in here 15 minutes ago. Grey sweater, natural curls, chalk on her hands." His words sliced through the curated calm like a scalpel, and Lauren's smile twitched, a crack forming in her polished armor. She glanced toward Preston Hale's table, an instinct, not a strategy, and Julian caught it. "Nia came here to make a reservation for our anniversary," he said, voice rising just enough to carry. 10 years since our first date, at this restaurant. But from what I understand, she was asked to leave." The room stilled, even the clink of silverware halted. Preston, mid-sip of his wine, lowered his glass slowly, color draining from his cheeks. Lauren opened her mouth, scrambling for a script that no longer worked. "There must have been a misunderstanding," she offered, but it landed flat, flimsy, pathetic. Julian took a slow step forward. "So let me get this straight. A black woman in a grey sweater walks in to make a reservation and is told you're fully booked. No check, no questions. Meanwhile, this man," he motioned toward Preston, "makes a joke about food courts and suddenly the red carpet rolls out." A low murmur rippled through the room. Diners who had chuckled earlier now looked away, some adjusting their napkins, others suddenly fascinated with their plates. The silence screamed complicity. Julian's stare pinned Lauren in place. "You had no idea who she was," he said, quieter now but deadlier. "And that's exactly the problem." Behind him, the glass door opened again. Nia stepped into the golden haze, her face lit with a mixture of hurt and strength. Her eyes met Julian's, then Lauren's, then the rest of the room. The woman they'd dismissed had just become the center of gravity. She walked toward him slowly, each step pressing into the silence. Julian extended his hand. She took it. Together they turned to face the room, unapologetic, undeniable. And suddenly, Echelon West didn't feel like theirs anymore. For a long beat, no one moved. The tension clung to the chandeliers like fog, heavy and slow, casting fractured reflections across stunned faces. Nia stood with Julian, their joined hands a quiet act of defiance, her grey sweater a stark contrast against the opulence surrounding her. But it was her eyes, calm, focused, unflinching, that made people shift in their seats. Not in shame. Not yet. but discomfort had finally crept in. Lauren cleared her throat, the sound brittle. She stepped out from behind the podium, her heels clicking across the marble like a reluctant surrender. Her expression wavered between practiced poise and unraveling regret. "Mrs. Carter," she said, too formal, too late. I didn't realize." "You didn't ask," Nia replied, her voice level but stripped of any performative warmth. "You looked at me and decided everything you needed to know." Julian didn't speak. He didn't have to. His presence behind her, silent and unwavering, was louder than any rebuke. But then, from the edge of the dining room, a new sound broke the stillness. Footsteps, quick, nervous, approaching from the staff corridor. It was James, the young waiter who had watched everything unfold. His black uniform hung awkwardly on his tall frame, but his movements were decisive now. He stopped beside Lauren, eyes flicking to Nia, then to Julian. "She tried," he said, voice tight with conviction. "She explained. Twice. I should have said something. I'm sorry." He pulled off his apron with a suddenness that startled even himself and laid it over the podium. "I can't work somewhere that lets this happen." The ripple of shock that followed was different this time, sharper, real. Lauren looked at James, stunned. "You don't have to." "I already did," he said, backing away. "Someone should have stood up sooner." Near the rear of the dining room, a silver-haired woman in a velvet shawl rose slowly from her seat. Her husband followed, his cane tapping once against the floor before he steadied himself. They crossed the space with deliberate dignity. "Young lady," the woman said to Nia, her voice soft but sure, "I hope you don't let this place stain your memory. We've been dining here for 15 years, but tonight's our last." She turned to Lauren, then to Margaret, the manager who had only now emerged from the shadows. "You let it happen. That's enough for us." The cracks widened. Margaret's smile, honed by decades of damage control, flickered. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter, if we could offer you a private dining experience, complimentary of course." Julian cut her off with a simple shake of his head. "You don't get to fix this with comped steak and a bottle of wine. The damage isn't yours to repair." Nia exhaled slowly. The fire in her chest had cooled, replaced by a weight she didn't want to carry, but she had no choice. "You all made a decision tonight," she said. "Not based on policy, on perception. The apology doesn't belong to me. It belongs to every person you've made feel invisible who didn't have someone walk through that door for them." Her words landed, no applause, no outburst, just silence, heavy and deserved. Julian touched her elbow gently. "Let's go." As they turned toward the exit, heads bowed slightly, not in reverence, but reconsideration. Behind them, James held the door open, a quiet gesture of respect. And though the night outside was colder now, Nia stepped into it standing taller, each breath grounding her. The war wasn't over, but this battle, they hadn't just survived it, they'd rewritten it. 3 weeks later, the skyline of Los Angeles glimmered under the early bite of winter, and Echelon West stood quieter now, stripped of the glittering arrogance it once wore like armor. A discreet under-new management sign hung near the revolving doors. Margaret had resigned within days of the incident. Lauren followed suit, her departure sealed with a letter addressed not to the restaurant, but to Nia Carter. Raw, awkward, and filled with words that stopped just short of redemption. The headlines had done what no amount of internal PR could: exposed the truth. A single smartphone recording, Julian's calm voice calling out the hypocrisy, Nia's quiet strength beside him, James placing his apron on the podium, had gone viral within hours. Millions watched it, shared it, debated it. But for Nia and Julian, the real story was never about spectacle. It was about principle. That night, as news anchors dissected the footage and hashtags trended across platforms, Nia didn't celebrate. She sat on the edge of her bed, bare feet on the hardwood, her thoughts tangled with memory and ache. Julian came in quietly, placed a mug of tea in her hands, and kissed her forehead without a word. They had sparked a fire, but it came with heat, and now, under the warm glow of hanging bulbs strung across a modest brick courtyard on the city's east side, they were reclaiming what mattered. The pay-what-you-can cafe buzzed with life, long wooden tables stretched across the room, filled with families, elders, students, strangers leaning in like old friends. No chandeliers, no maitre d', just laughter, warmth, and the scent of roasted chicken and cornbread hanging in the air. Nia wore a simple navy dress. Her curls were loose, her face relaxed. She scanned the room, watching a young boy giggle as his grandmother fed him mashed potatoes, and an elderly man in a Dodgers cap, tapping his spoon to a beat only he could hear. This, she thought, is what belonging feels like. Julian sat beside her, sleeves rolled, eyes glowing as he watched her. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. "I am now." Just then, James appeared at their table, his usual uniform replaced by a well-loved hoodie and a folder tucked under his arm. He beamed as he handed it to Nia. Inside was a grant proposal, his new youth mentorship program rooted in food security and dignity. With Julian's backing, the Carter Foundation had already green-lit it. A movement had bloomed from that moment of injustice. "You changed more than just a restaurant," James said, his voice soft. "You changed the trajectory for people like me." Nia looked down at the folder, then up at him. "We didn't change it alone." Outside, a group of volunteers set up a table with fresh bread, handing it out with smiles to anyone passing by. No dress code, no questions, just care. And as the evening sky deepened, Nia leaned back in her chair and let herself breathe. Not in triumph, but in truth. Because the lesson she learned was this: redemption isn't about punishment, it's about recognition. And change doesn't start with apology. It begins with the courage to hold the mirror up and still choose to do better. So if this story struck a chord, if you've ever walked into a room and been told without words that you don't belong, remember this: your worth was never up for debate. If you loved this wild ride at Echelon West, where Nia Carter's clash with silent bias turned a simple dinner reservation into a viral reckoning, then buckle up, because there's so much more to come. Hit that subscribe button for the X Daily Stories channel, your front row seat to gripping tales that twist, turn, and leave you thinking. We're dropping fresh, cinematic stories every week, drama, suspense, and lessons that stick with you long after the credits roll. Don't miss out. Join our crew, turn on notifications, and dive into the next epic adventure.